The Teen Wolf TV series is one of my inspirations I chose for my short film, not for the fantasy side of it, but rather the storylines and characters, especially focusing on season 2 and 3 of the show. The character that specifically stood out to me and the storyline that intrigued me was the character of Isaac. Isaac is a young adult living with his father after his older brother and mum passed away. Isaac has to deal with a busy social life and maintaining good grades whilst dealing with an abusive father at home. The main reason his character is so good to look at in the show is how, compared to all the supernatural beings and things in the town they're in, Isaac's problems fall around his home life and something so real that people watching can relate to in contrast with a show wholly based on fiction. In a show based all around fiction, it is clear for the audience that Isaac's problems are more reality in our everyday world, rather than the supernatural, and are very real and scary for him and the audience watching, as it brings a more scary reality to the story that even with all the supernatural beings and villains, Isaac's biggest fear is his own father and the tricks his mind plays on himself, which is something very real compared to the rest of the show. As the show progresses, Isaac's father is eventually murdered, leaving Isaac behind to live with different friends and focus more on helping others and trusting new people. However, even though he is free, throughout the seasons, Isaac is shown left with some serious mental and emotional scars from his family. Isaac deals with extreme claustrophobia in even slightly small rooms, as well as nightmares and flashbacks of his past and panic attacks. His mental stability throughout the season shows how he copes with his fears and how he grows as a person. This, to me, being the audience, is interesting and intriguing to watch, which is why I think putting someone like this with similar traits in a thriller film that I'm creating might also appeal to others the same way this storyline appeals to me. Motel California is an episode halfway through season 3 and is an episode I particularly like for the way they present and show the audience Isaac's struggles. The nightmares are shown visually and feature visual flashbacks of what the character is scared of or fearing. For my short film, I really like the idea of the main character having struggles and mental issues, as I want my short film to have a slight psychological aspect to it. My thoughts on my short film was not to create a lot of characters, but one main character who is their own worst enemy and constantly fights battles with himself/herself, but being both the antagonist and protagonist of the story. The idea of someone dealing with their own demons and battles inside them due to a mental illness and fighting them and conquering them, whilst visually showing the audience the progress with things like flashbacks and nightmares, I think would make an interesting storyline, and it could be adapted and twisted in so many different ways to create something creepy and dark, fitting the typical codes and conventions of a thriller. When I'm making my short film, I want my main character to have similarities to a character like Isaac. Someone dealing with issues inside their head and someone being their own worst enemies, I think would make an interesting storyline, and the ways you could make it your own by changing the characters' fears and what they're scared of and how they deal with it. Having deep-rooted problems stemming from early in home life determining how the characters develop to what they are on screen, and letting the audience see how the evolution has happened, I think would make a good main character for a short film. A good base for a storyline, as I don't want to overcomplicate the film with many different characters, but I still want to somehow meet the stereotypes and conventions of thrillers, usually featuring an antagonist and protagonist. Given my main character for my Given my main character for my thriller issues to deal with, I think would be really fun to work with and on, and personalise in my own way, twisting my storyline into something original that is interesting for me to create and the audience to watch. Another aspect I liked about this show that inspired me for my short film is a lot of the characters' costumes and personalities. The show bases their storylines around a high school and the kids in it. The teenagers are all dressed current and are dressed in clothes you would see a teenager wearing every day. This aspect of mise-en-scene contributes to the contrast of everyday life and all the supernatural drama these teens are also caught up in, and how they come across as people you wouldn't expect to see in these situations. Keeping the characters in my short film modern, everyday people instead of monsters or villains that might require an expensive costume and a lot of special effects makeup means I can create costumes a lot easier, and I can create more believable storylines for these characters that the audience can then relate to, as they can pick out similarities, which is why the costumes of this show inspired the style I want my characters to look in my short film. Also, camera work and lighting are another thing that this show has inspired for me. As most thrillers, this show uses a huge variety of different shots and lighting techniques. The show uses basic shots such as close-ups, long shots, extreme close-ups, over-the-shoulder shots, and many others. However, like a lot of other thrillers as well, this show does a good job of using shots and lighting that create a feel for the audience and give the scene something more to them. For example, a bird's eye view shot are used in the scene where Isaac is trapped in a janitor's closet. The shot shows the capacity of the room and the size of it. Tilt downs are used often to give the character of Isaac less power, showing he is weak in the situation. The scene then uses shots where the camera is placed under Isaac looking up from a worm's eye view to Isaac panicking and hitting a door. This changes the situation around and shows Isaac gaining more strength and power as he hits the door harder. When the door closes, the lighting immediately turns red and the non-diegetic music changes. This straight away connotates anger, danger, and something bad about to happen. Being able to determine the atmosphere on screen by just lighting and sound is something I think is very important for a short film, because it sets the tone rather than using dialogue, which I think gives the film a much more professional feel and look to it. So I want to consider this when putting my film together and writing and creating the planning and production process. Other shots in the show that are usually used in fight scenes or scenes where someone is hurt are shots where the camera turns sideways or flips. This is a less common camera shot and isn't used very often, so when it is used, it can give the audience the effect that something might be wrong or something wrong is happening on screen. Which to me I think is clever, as the audience can interpret their own ideas purely based on the camera shot. So using shots like these is something to be considered when putting my short film together. Coming back to the lighting of the show, the scenes are usually lit with dark key lighting, giving a gloomy and eerie atmosphere when they are investigating or figuring things out. Even during day-lit scenes at school or outside, the lighting still manages to stay neutral and not too bright, with cool coloured costumes and props. When I make my short film, I want to consider keeping lighting low and not distracting the audience with dramatic colour changes or bright colours on screen, as my short film is a thriller and setting the tone and atmosphere to look serious and dark is very important to making the thriller look professional and real like other thrillers already made.